Do former distillery owners oversee production, even in the afterlife?
Who is the ghostly figure that helps keep this building safe?
Who or what haunts the gift shop of this historical landmark?
Find out the answers to these questions and more as we uncover the spirited hauntings and history from the Buffalo Trace Distillery in Frankfort, Kentucky.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Erica.
And this is The Haunted Atlas, a Haunted US podcast.
In the interest of fully exploring history of certain locations, the Haunted Atlas may discuss sensitive or disturbing topics. Listener discretion is advised.
An ominous brick building with over 2 centuries of history and National Historical Register status sits unassumingly in Kentucky. Known for their famous spirits, Buffalo Trace Distillery is also earning a name for itself as a location with ghosts. The history of Buffalo Trace Distillery actually dates back to the 1790s.
That's old.
It's further than I thought.
Yeah.
This is when Kentucky was still in the process of actually becoming a state. That's how old this distillery is.
That's really crazy. I haven't really thought about that before, but yeah, I guess people existed in these places that didn't exist in quotation marks. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
They were just on the land. There was nothing to call it.
Right. And 1790s, that's not long after the revolution.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So this is very far back. It continued to grow, and by 1812, the business was significant enough to have grown into a large-scale commercial distillery. The building that housed the distillery was built by Harrison Blanton, and the company continued and continued to grow. In 1858, the company increased production to an industrial scale. So here we're seeing, starting off very small and then just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and really gaining traction quickly.
Yeah.
In just, 60 years, we see that it's industrial scale. Due to the success of the company, in 1870, Colonel Edmund Haynes Taylor Jr. purchased it. Fun fact, he is actually a distant relative of former President Zachary Taylor.
Oh, that's really funny.
Yeah,
what a crazy connection.
Yeah, and he does have the colonel designation, so I wonder if somehow that's tied in, military family type thing. Taylor made some big changes, including changing the name to OFC. You might be wondering, what does OFC stand for? It stands for Old Fashioned Copper Stills. And that was the preferred way of distilling at the time for Taylor. Taylor spent $70,000 trying to grow the business further, and he wanted to perfect this craft, but eventually had to declare bankruptcy because that's $70,000 in 1870s money.
I was going to say that's a lot of money to spend. And I know that they were growing quickly, but that's so much money.
Right, and if you think of the sheer amount of copper he would need to purchase to turn everything over in an industrial plant to copper stills, that's a lot of material.
Yeah, and copper is expensive, as we know from house hunting. Copper pipes.
Yeah, copper pipes, worth money. So in 1877, just 7 years after he purchased it, he actually had to sell the company. He sold to George T. Stagg, and Stagg took control of OFC and even opened another distillery. So these people aren't just taking over the company, they're taking over and trying to expand an already huge entity.
Kind of like franchising it.
Yeah, exactly. The two companies were on opposite ends of the spectrum, though, which was interesting. The other distillery was named the Carlisle Distillery, and it was known for cheap products, whereas OFC was known for high-end products due to the copper stills. So here he's trying to capture the whole market, the whole spread of the market,
right,
from very cheap to very high-end. In 1904, OFC was renamed the George T. Stagg Distillery after the owner, which makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
Now, we are at 1904, but we know something's coming down the line. Prohibition.
Oh, right.
Yes. So Prohibition came, and you would think it would spell doom for any distillery. Albert Blanton, who was a loyal employee of George T. Stagg Distillery, stepped in with another plan. He was able to actually secure a permit to keep the distillery open by claiming to distribute medicinal alcohol.
I was gonna ask if that's what it was. I feel like so many people justified it with medicinal things. I'm always so surprised at what stayed open and how they used alcohol differently, but the same during
Yes.
Prohibition. They came up with so many different ideas.
Yeah, and this honestly reminds me of the COVID-19 pandemic because these companies that produced alcohol were taking their alcohol and putting it into hand sanitizer. I know that there is a lot of local smaller distilleries that were selling hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
Company leaders were so impressed with Blanton that he was promoted to company president.
Ooh.
And deserved, if we're being honest.
Yes, absolutely. Getting them through Prohibition is a feat.
Yeah. There was another round of permits in 1929, and he was once again able to secure a permit, and it kept the business profitable for all of the 1920s and 30s, which again, a huge deal.
Yeah.
Fast forward to after Prohibition, and the distillery is continuing to thrive. It actually became the first distillery in Kentucky to produce 2 million barrels of alcohol post Prohibition, and they did this by 1953.
Oh my gosh. 20 years, basically, ish?
Yeah, that's a lot. 2
Yeah.
million barrels of anything is a significant amount, especially when you consider the changes in production that happened then. A lot of it was likely less automated than things are now.
True. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
You might be thinking, okay, here's the history of it. It's changed hands, blah, 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 blah. When does it become Buffalo Trace? The change actually didn't happen until the 1990s. After a period of mismanagement, the distillery was sold to the Sazerac Company, and it reopened in 1999 under the new name of Buffalo Trace Distillery. And once again, it thrived.
Right.
In 2000, Buffalo Trace Distillery became the first in America to be awarded Whiskey Advocate's Distillery of the Year distinction. And this is just such a crazy concept to me because I feel like a name like Buffalo Trace Distillery, it's huge in this area. I think of it as having so much history behind it, and it does. But to
Yeah.
know that the history of it as Buffalo Trace only started in 1999 was very surprising to me.
Yes, especially because my brain keeps thinking like, "Oh, that was like 10 years ago." But actually, I mean, at this point now it's like 25, which is much longer than I was thinking, but it feels really recent.
It does.
And what, that's exactly almost 200 years after it began
Oh, yeah, that's a good
originally.
point. That's true. And if you think of all of the hands that it has been in the 200 years, it's amazing that it maintained being profitable, other than the one guy that went bankrupt, which kind of sounds like that was his fault. But
Right, yeah.
as a distillery and company itself, it thrived. So they must have had good recipes, a good system, and have continued to iterate on it, I'm guessing.
Right.
The building itself has so much historical significance that it was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 2013. Those looking for good whiskey and a wealth of history may travel to Buffalo Trace Distillery, but they may be surprised to know that many also claim it's haunted.
Hi, I'm Hannah.
And I'm Matt Hannah.
We're Horror Hour with the Hannahs, a married couple who love digging into the guts of horror movies.
Literally and figuratively.
Whether it's new releases or cult classics, on our podcast we break down the scares, themes, and hidden messages with just the right amount of love and humor, with some occasional bickering.
So grab your popcorn and your emotional support blanket and join us Wednesdays.
For a spooky good time with Horror Hour with the Hannahs.
Available wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe today, if you dare.
This distillery has been significant throughout history, so it's no surprise that some spirits may linger among the whiskey. In fact, claims of the haunting actually date back to the early 20th century. The story goes that a group of workers were doing some updates in Warehouse C. The foreman had fallen asleep on the job, and he was awoken to a voice telling him to get the workers out of there. He was unable to find the source of the voice and actually ended up falling back asleep. He was awoken again by the same voice with the same message. But this time, it was yelling at him.
Oh, that's intense.
And unsettling, I'm sure.
Yes.
You already can't find the source of this voice to have it escalating and increasing in volume.
Right.
He was so rattled by this that he actually did evacuate the building. Shortly after, a wall collapsed in the area where the workers had been. There are still claims today that Warehouse C is haunted, but it seems that it's haunted by a kind spirit that's actually looking out for people.
Whenever we hear about hauntings like this, I feel like it's so hard for me to collect any words to describe how I'm feeling. Like, I just kind of sit here with my mouth wide open because that is so mind-boggling. The fact that he just heard someone's voice, believed it, and then something happened directly after that kind of justifies what he heard. It wasn't a dream, likely. You know? And
Yeah.
even if it was a dream, in my opinion, that's still paranormal. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's just crazy to me that stuff like this happens.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's kind of like the spirit had a premonition about what was going to happen, which begs the question of, do these spirits, ghosts, whatever you want to call them, have knowledge of the future?
Is there even a future for them? Like, what if they just exist at all times? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I see.
Like they're ever present.
And that's how they would know the wall was going to collapse.
Right.
That's a good theory. I was going down kind of a rabbit hole here thinking it's a spirit. What if the spirit was psychic and maintained those abilities in death, and that's how they did it?
But that's kind of cool though too. I like that idea.
Yeah, but it's much more convoluted than your theory. Your theory is much more straightforward. It could be both. And I was trying to think of who this spirit could be, but given that this was the early 20th century and there's so much history with this distillery, it could be so many different people.
Right. And kind of going along with your theory of it being a psychic, maybe that particular spirit, like Warehouse C might be haunted by other spirits as well, and that one may have been a psychic that roams to different sites and tells people or tries to
Mm.
prevent disasters from happening.
That's a cool way to spend your afterlife.
Yeah.
I feel like it's some of the other locations we've covered that would have been very helpful. Like
Yes.
the dam.
Yes.
The distillery has a gift shop that offers more than just souvenirs. People say it's haunted. Many times there are reports of lights being on in the building, only for security guards to go into the building and confirm there are no lights on. Lights and hauntings are always challenging to me because there's the possibility that someone is just leaving them on, that there's an electrical issue, etc. However, given that this is a repeat occurrence and that the building is currently in use, I think if it was an electrical issue or even a staff issue leaving the lights on, it would have been fixed by now.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think the whole concept of a light being on and then someone going in and checking and it's off or there are no lights on every single time they go in
Mhm.
also is kind of unexplainable.
Yeah, and so what do you think? Do you think that it's a spirit turning the lights on and then turning them off when people approach, or do you think it's the spirit itself emitting light?
Oh, that's a good question. I honestly could see it going either way, but I do think the second one might be more probable. Um, because I think that it makes sense to me that spirits may become available to our eyes in
Mhm,
certain situations, and then they can kind of turn that off. So if they see people approaching, they might go back into, the spirit realm
mhm,
thing. I think, like, that is more probable in my head than a spirit, like, turning the lights on and off.
right. That's kind of what I was thinking, or even if it's an overall people talk about energy associated with hauntings, not just necessarily the spirit. If it's almost like a haunting of a snapshot of time
Oh,
where the
yeah.
lights are on, maybe, or maybe the spirit's like holding a candle or something, giving the illusion of light, not necessarily flipping on a light switch.
Oh, yeah, that's true too.
Visitors also report strange happenings in the gift shops, such as footsteps pounding on the second floor, even when no one is up there. When visitors are on the second floor, they report feeling anxious and sometimes even capturing photographic abnormalities. So, this is where you're seeing like spirit orbs and such come into play. So many people think that the level above the gift shop is haunted, given that you can hear the footsteps from the first floor. Now, the anxiety part is always challenging for me because I guess there's really no reason for a visitor to feel anxious here. But when it comes to feelings like that, it's hard for me to attribute it to the paranormal. What do you think?
Yes, I agree. I was gonna say that it depends fully for me anyways, and my belief on whether or not they know that it might be haunted, because I think if you know that it might be haunted, then of course your anxiety is gonna rise.
Mhm.
If you have no idea that it's haunted and these reports are coming from people who are just walking down the stairs and are like, "Wow, I felt really anxious up there," that's different because there would be no reason, arguably, to feel anxious in a gift shop. But I mean, if people do realize it's haunted, that always leads to anxiety, in my opinion, unless you're like one of the bravest people, which I know there are people out there who don't feel anxious at ghosts and like spirits and investigations and stuff. But I think for most people, anxiety comes into play.
That's a good point. More data on who is reporting it and when
Yeah.
would be good. I think given the footsteps, that makes me think that it could be haunted. But I do also struggle with photography because there are so many things that can come up.
Yeah.
And there's been a few cases where we've even captured stuff that we thought, oh, maybe this is a spirit orb, or we've discussed in previous locations that we think it could potentially be evidence, but we actually have our executive producer who's a photographer and is able to debunk a lot of that stuff and talk us through how it happens. And I think without a resource like that, it's really easy to look at an image and see, a speck and think,
Yeah.
oh, this is a spirit orb.
Another factor that could lead into we should ask who's reporting the anxiety feelings is it people who have heard the footsteps and are walking up the stairs? Because obviously in that case, that would lead to some anxiety too.
That's a really good point. You heard footsteps upstairs and then you get upstairs and you realize that there's no one up there.
Yeah.
That's a really great point. I don't know. So that one, I'll give it neither here nor there. On the property, there sits the Stony Point Mansion, and the mansion was actually home of Albert Blanton, who you'll remember was the president of the company eventually, and he actually died in the home. He appears not only in the mansion, but throughout the property as a thin gray apparition. This is reported by visitors and staff alike. I think this makes a lot of sense.
Oh, I agree. I mean, especially if he passed away on site.
Right. And he was clearly very, very dedicated. He got them through prohibition. He was the president of the company. He's invested in it. And it could also be that he just is happy there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That could be like I chose to spend my afterlife here. I mean, you always hope that that's the case. I am wondering about his presentation, though. A thin gray apparition is kind of interesting. You would almost think he'd just be like an apparition, like just a regular.
Yeah, I was almost thinking of it as black and white movies,
Oh,
like that
yeah.
type of presentation. That doesn't make sense why he would choose to present in that way. But that's when I think of how he would look, that's kind of how I think it might be. And it's interesting that he is appearing to workers and visitors alike. It's kind of indiscriminate how he is showing himself. And when the workers are seeing him in the mansion specifically, he's only appearing for a very short amount of time.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, which makes me wonder if he does want to be seen or if he's in the mansion and these people are there and he doesn't want them there because it was his home.
Yeah, that's also possible. I mean, we've talked in the past about spirits who may just want to be left alone, which is understandable. And, he could be appearing, realizing there's people there, and then backing up.
Right. And because he's showing up throughout the campus and there's not really any bad associations with his spirit, it makes me wonder if he could be the voice of Warehouse C. However, it depends on when in the early 1900s that happened because he was alive for part of the early 1900s.
Yeah, that would be kind of cool, actually, if it was him just kind of watching over everybody.
Yeah, and it would make sense to me that he's overseeing production and safety, etc., even in his afterlife.
Yeah.
And the reason that I also think that might be the case is because people have reported hearing his voice in the mansion. So we do have some auditory hauntings along with the visual.
Do people say what he says? Like, are there any reports of, like, the actual stuff?
No, I couldn't find anything about that, which would be cool. I always urge people when they're reporting these hauntings, like, give as much detail as you can. Like, it was this date, this time, it was this weather outside. This is
Yeah.
exactly what I heard, exactly what I saw. But I guess that's just us as paranormal enthusiasts
Right.
wanting to capture as much data as possible. I think the average visitor would just be like, "Oh my gosh, I saw a ghost."
Yes, yeah, agreed. Of course, because our theories are so based on, like, the specifics of the haunting.
Right. There are other auditory hauntings as well in the mansion. People report disembodied voices of little girls, and it's unclear who these girls might be. There wouldn't really be young girls in that mansion, I don't think. I wonder if they're somehow tied to Blanton, given that he resided there. Maybe they were friends of the family or even the children of a worker.
Yeah, I was gonna say if Take Your Daughter to Work Day started, like, way back in the early 1900s, 1800s, I don't know when that day started, but that was the only thing I could think of. Because why else would little, children be around this place?
Yeah, and I know that factory work for children was common in like
Oh,
the industrial era, but I don't know. To me, when it involves like a distillery, it would be less common, and that might not be the case. I don't know historically if that's true, but the voice of multiple little girls being in the mansion specifically is interesting to me
oh,
because if they were
yeah,
factory workers, you would think that they would be in one of the warehouses or something.
that's true. So then, yeah, maybe you're right, maybe it's, like, Blanton's family.
Yeah, or a worker's family, someone. There's so much history there.
Yeah.
The location gained even more notoriety as a paranormal site when it was featured on an episode of Sci-Fi's Ghost Hunters. The distillery has offered ghost tours for many years and is often very open to talking about the ghost stories associated. Unfortunately, the distillery did suffer bad floods this past June, but you can support them today by visiting the distillery or purchasing their items. Visitors can enjoy spirits with a side of spirits at this distillery. Any final thoughts on Buffalo Trace hauntings?
I do I am really interested. I would love to go, I think, and try to figure out because there's so much history. I just started like 7 sentences. There's so much history there that it would be kind of cool to try to see who is there.
Absolutely. I think it's really shocking that we don't have more knowledge of who exactly these spirits are.
Yeah,
Yes, we know Blanton is there, but other than that, there must be people that we can pinpoint one way or another,
right.
even by asking what era they lived in, if you could get them to communicate back and forth. So I think there's a lot of investigative work that can be done here.
Yeah.
If you've visited Buffalo Trace Distillery, we would love to hear from you. Email the team at hauntedus.com and include Haunted Atlas episode 24 in the subject, or find us on social media at HauntedUS. Tune into our next episode to see where we drop the pin on our adventure across the Haunted US. This episode of Haunted Atlas was presented by Sarah Sweeney and Erica Barrett. It was researched by Sarah Sweeney, supported by research from Haunted US head writer Mitch Goff, with production assistance by David Sweeney and music by Colleen Johnson. Our executive producer is Brandon Rugsey. Haunted Atlas is a production of Haunted US. Visit hauntedus.com for more information.